Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pizzapia. It is Kyle Yates, and it's you. And we're talking all things NFC West today. It's preview day. It's a fun Friday, but I want to remind everybody, this is a series we're doing. So if you're trying to prepare for your upcoming, all of your football leagues, all your fantasy stuff you got going on, you want to kind of recap the offseason a little bit, get yourself focused, who's where, what these teams are going to look at. We're going to be doing every single one of these divisions. You can go down the rabbit hole and have a lot of fun with this, but today it's West Coast style, and I wanted to bring in one of my favorite people in the industry as a guest. But before we bring him in, because I know everybody knows him, he's super famous, Yates, I just want to check in. Because the deck progress, we've made progress on it, right? It looks like it's finished. I don't know if it has rails. I don't know if it's up to code. But I just want
it's definitely
Yates
up to code.
I just want Yates back on the podcast because I just want to make sure you don't get buried under this deck that's being built outside your house.
Well, it's so funny. My dad was telling a story about someone that he knows that was building a deck a while back, and he said that they're like practical jokers, and what they did is they were building this deck. They went to like Party City or one of these toy stores, right? And they got like a toy skeleton and put it underneath the deck. So he's like, this poor guy who's going to rip up this deck in like 25 to 30 years is going to rip this up and find this little skeleton underneath and going to freak out. I did not do that. Everything is up to code. The deck, we are able to sit on it. I was out there earlier this morning. We got the grass in, and that's growing. Oh, man, I am just loving life right now.
The grass is growing. Look at you. I think that you would change your Twitter handle to Yates Fantasy Pros, blah, 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 Dynasty Football Podcast, up to code. Hashtag up to code. That's what he is. And our guest for today's show, you know him because he runs a very small fantasy football league that people like to join and network in and just play and have fun. I kid, of course. It is the biggest of the big. It is fantastic, and he has done it all for charity. He has started the Scott Fish Bowl years ago. We are now in year 11, if you can believe it, of this, and it is fantastic. Scott Fish, welcome to the program. You've done so much for so many people, and not just obviously in the fantasy football industry, but helping so many people out with Fantasy Cares. And once again, you've inspired me in the Black Book. We've been doing things with St. Jude's for the last few years. That's awesome. Contribute to Fantasy Cares during Scott Fish Bowl drafts. So if you wanted to wait to buy your Black Book, buy it the week their SFB 11 starts, because we make that donation from sales right to Scott Fish and the Scott Fish Bowl and all the great stuff you do. But Fish, welcome to the program, my friend. How are you? You're a busy man, sending invites everywhere.
I am really busy, but it's really awesome to be here. I'm excited for this. I'm excited to be on this show.
Well, we're happy to have you. And I got to tell you, I don't know how you do it. Like every year you got to manage all of these requests. Everybody wants to be a part of this thing. Do you ever sit back and just go, what happened here? How did this become this huge thing? You thought you were going to run some leagues and all this stuff. How many people are we up to now? Is it like 8 million? Well, I don't know. What is it?
Last year was 1440 and another 1440 just in the satellites. So it was, it was nearly 3,000 people played in the SFB leagues last year. And this year it's going to be much, much bigger.
Well, look, man, everybody loves it. Everybody gets excited. And I think that it's great that as an industry, you've created something that also kind of feels like, I don't know about you, Yates, doesn't it feel like Scott Fish Bowl kind of jumpstarts the fantasy season? I kind of feel like that's like the first, you plant your flag and like, all right, here we go. Let's have this happen. Doesn't it kind of have that feeling to it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to chime in and just say, like,
Fish, it starts way earlier. We know
It does.
It starts in January, I think.
I've definitely heard people say that it's the unofficial kickoff to fantasy season.
Do you feel that same way, Yates?
Yeah, absolutely. That is the moment where we can kind of start to get really, really excited, right? Like, it's like, this is where you're finally starting to draft the players that you've been doing all the research on. And of course, the turn there for Scott Fish Bowl just absolutely signals that we are getting closer and closer to football. Absolutely admire Scott and everything that he does for the community, but then also for, Fantasy Cares there. So really, really excited to have him on, not only just because I get to talk to him, but then also his insight here. Love what he brings to the table.
Well, he's going to bring it today because we're going to talk about the NFC West teams. Before we do, I want to remind everybody we've got a fun chat available for you at fantasypros.com/chat on Discord. So if you join Discord for free, you can get in there and start chatting with us. We're going to have some AMAs, some interactive stuff on there. I'm on there already for baseball every single day, but football's right around the corner. Well, who are we kidding? Football's here. So let's obviously try to get in on that. Also, I want to remind everybody, thanks to our friends at Pristine Auction, we've got that Stephon Diggs jersey. We're trying to give you, again, free stuff for you. Go to fantasypros.com/contest. all you got to do is drop a review on Apple Podcasts or CastBox, and then go to fantasypros.com/contest, upload that review, fill out the form, and just like that, the Diggs jersey could be yours for free. And you're also entered then in every other subsequent contest. So get in that. Do it. Thanks to our buddies over at Pristine Auction. Let's start with some fun here. Let's start with the 49ers, because this is a team that just had an injury to a running back in Jeffrey Wilson Jr. It's a team that just drafted a quarterback 3rd overall. And Scott Fish, when you start to look at this roster right now, I think the first thing we have to figure out is who's playing quarterback and for how long are they playing quarterback? So we all know what Yates and I think. I want to hear somebody else's vision of what the 49ers are going to do at that position in 2021, because that's where it all starts in fantasy.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing Trey Lance doesn't win that job early. I don't know how early, but I feel like it's Trey Lance's job to win. I thought you were going to ask me, the first thing you have to look at is who's going to actually stay healthy this year when you talk about the San Francisco 49ers.
That's also a viable question.
But I do think it's Trey Lance's role, and I actually really, really love Lance in this offense because as Matt Waldman has described, Trey Lance reads the field from low to high, and what better offense with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk is more perfectly aligned for Trey Lance's skill set. That's why in college he had 17 games, not a huge amount of yards in those games, not a lot of deep balls, but we've seen his deep ball. It's beautiful and amazing. He just hasn't had to use it a lot. But I think it's Trey Lance, and I think it's Trey Lance early.
All right, how early, Yates, do you think it's realistic to see Trey Lance take over this role? And when he does, what impact does this have on the running backs collectively? Because I want to get to them as a group, but I think we have to talk about the bigger concept around that first.
Sure, yeah. So I think the realistic and what I have projected at this point is the bye week. The San Francisco 49ers have their bye week in week 6, and I think that is when we see that shift start to take place. Now, I have said since Trey Lance was drafted here that it's very possible that he beats out Jimmy Garoppolo right out of the gate. Like, there is a very strong possibility here that we see Trey Lance as the starting quarterback week 1. Everyone in the pre-draft process was saying that Trey Lance needs to sit a year. He's not pro-ready.
That's the worst idea, Yates. Can I just tell you, how can a guy who sat all last year sit for a whole other year? That's crazy madness to me, Yates.
Can I make a counterpoint to wait until the bye? In the last 2 years, Jimmy Garoppolo has been not injury, but benched for both Beathard and Mullins in games.
And he's missed, 22 games, I think, in the last 3 years?
I don't feel like he's got a long leash. But I agree. I mean, bye week makes a lot of sense. I just don't know he can make it that far.
So, Yates, we could set the bye week as basically the maybe, quote, worst case scenario in that transition, possibly earlier. What does that do to the running back? Because this is a very mobile quarterback. We all know, very athletic. But at the same time, this is a mix at running back. So how do you see that kind of converging of the two?
Yeah, so in my projection model, I've got the ability to be able to switch it up based on the quarterback 1 for a team and the quarterback 2, and based on the overall pass attempts and rush attempts. So with Jimmy Garoppolo, I think that you'll see, I've got them projected for 33 pass attempts a game and 27 rush attempts. With Trey Lance at quarterback, I've got 30 pass attempts per game and 32 rush attempts. So I think that we see the overall pie of the rush attempts increase with Trey Lance because, like you said, Joe, he is going to be heavily involved in the run game. But what that does, so the overall pie increases, but then for the running backs, the overall share decreases a little bit. Right. So it kind of evens out here where you're going to see Trey Lance take 5, 6, 7 carries per game because that's his skill set, and that's what they want here, not only on QB designed runs with read options, but then also on play action boots. They're going to get them out on the run with those wide zones, being able to threaten that, and then you come back across and Trey Lance's mobility is going to be able to pick up that additional yardage when there's no one on that side of the field because everyone's sold out to get the run. So I think that the overall pie increases here, but the overall target, or not the target share, the rush share, the carry share there for Trey Sermon, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson when he comes back to the lineup is going to decrease a little bit.
All right. By the way, everybody, head over to Yates' Twitter handle, too, because his pinned tweet's got the really cool projection tool that you can basically tailor-make for yourself and manipulate. It's a very cool thing, so you can go get that over there. Go tag that and go get it. It's on the pinned tweet over at Kyle Y NFL. Fish, let's get back to you with these running backs because we do have Jeffrey Wilson Jr. out, who was my guy going in. I said, I love this early ECR on him. I love where he's going to go ADP-wise. To me, I'm looking for the best return on investment. Now, with Wayne Gallman there, too, Mostert there, JaMychal Hasty is still there on this squad, too. it's Trey Sermon to me who's in the 40s right now in terms of ECR that I'm kind of looking at and saying, you know what, if I'm going to throw a dart, maybe this is the guy, and maybe the youth kind of emerges as the season goes for the 49ers. How do you feel about approaching his backfield? Because I stay away from it early, but I think late, Sermon is worth that pick if you can afford to kind of stash him and hold.
Yeah, this must be the bald.
Well, we're very smart.
This must be the bald guy connect. I also really liked Jeff Wilson and loved where you could get him, and thought he was a bowling ball that would get some nice red zone touches.
I was depressed when I saw this last week.
It's a weird dichotomy. I was sad that I couldn't get him late anymore, but I felt like it cleared up the backfield a little bit more for fantasy. So maybe there's two sides there. But I'm right with you. They're going in. Sermon and Mostert are going in similar ranges. I think the youth and the health it goes to Sermon a little bit. Mostert's he keeps getting injured. This is his final year on his contract. He's a free agent after this year. He's nearly 30 years old. I would take the younger back at a very similar price.
All right, let's talk about the wide receivers. Brandon Aiyuk had a breakout last year for sure in the second half of 2020. Deebo Samuel always shows the flashes of being very good. Yates. What do you make of these guys and George Kittle in this mix too? Because as great as Kittle's been, he has missed time, and touchdowns have never quite been his thing. Now, I don't know if that changes in your mind when we get to a red zone that looks like Trey Lance. To me, I don't know if we do, because Trey Lance has that ability to run the football in himself as well. So I don't see that touchdown number for Kittle going too much. Yates, in your opinion, do you think Aiyuk and Samuel are ready to kind of really flourish here for a full season, and can we get a full season out of Deebo?
One of my favorite stats from 2020 is that Deebo Samuel had an ADOT of 2.2 yards.
Sounds about right.
That was his average depth of target was 2.2.
Everywhere. That's all they do.
He was constantly being given the ball behind the line of scrimmage, close to the line of scrimmage, and then creating after the catch. And that's what this offense thrives on. Now with Brandon Aiyuk, I think that we are going to see him take a step forward. And he's being ranked there. He's ECR wide receiver 24 last I checked. I do think that he is that wide receiver 1 in this offense, the wide receiver 1. Deebo Samuel right behind it. But then after that, it's Mohamed Sanu, Richie James, Jalen Hurd, who can't stay healthy. I don't think any of those guys really factor in, especially when you see that the 49ers only ran 11 personnel like 40% of the time last year, right? They're living in 21 or 12 personnel. So it's George Kittle as the receiver 1 in this offense. The ball is going to be sent his way time and time again. And I think that he's going to rack up ridiculous yardage with Trey Lance there as the quarterback. We talked about that sooner rather than later. So I would go George Kittle, obviously first there. I've got him as a top 2 tight end yet again this year. Health is the main concern there. But then it's Brandon Aiyuk for me. I've got him in that same range as ECR. Deebo Samuel more as a low-end wide receiver 3.
All right, Father's Day is right around the corner, and for the hairy man in your life, or if you're the hairy man in your life, make sure you go to manscaped.com and get that Lawnmower 4.0. It's got that ceramic blade skin-safe technology. It's got the 4K LED light. I told you, Yates sometimes likes to sit at night, read a book just by the light of the Manscaped 4.0 lawnmower. It is spectacular. Plus, it's got a long battery life, so he goes over all the stats, and he's reading all these things. It really is a jack of all trades. It's also got new guard lengths 1 through 4 that you can get, and the Engage Travel Lock. Like I said, it's also got the hot foil stamped black chrome Manscaped logo, which is pretty sexy. I'm not going to lie. You're going to impress all of your friends, all your neighbors, when you walk around saying, hey, you maybe could wear it like old school back in the day where Fish and I used to have beepers. You could wear it right there and then just pull it out. Boom, look at my Manscaped lawnmower. Well, if you want that, go to manscaped.com. Use the code Yates. It's been inspired by Yates and his cool fade of his own hair with 20% off and free shipping. Once again, manscaped.com, Lawnmower 4.0. That code is Yates. Your balls. Well, thank you. So let's talk about the balls that are getting thrown around in Seattle. We also had a return of a running back there as well. So, Fish, let's start with you on this one. Russell Wilson, little rumblings about being unhappy. Chris Carson comes back into the fold. We saw DK Metcalf be all-world. This Seattle team is basically the same year over year. A new tight end, which has been a revolving door there. Gerald Everett finally coming over. We'll see if that revolving door kind of goes his way. But for me, I look at this team and I immediately see value with Chris Carson, who caught the ball a lot more last year, even though he only played 10 games. He also had a higher yards per carry. He looked like a better version of himself. The problem is, once again, missing time. What are your thoughts on Chris Carson here? Is he a very solid RB2 in your mind going forward that you want to have shares of, or are you a little worried about the injury concerns?
Yeah, I actually really like Carson. I'm taking him where he's going in that 5th or 6th round range. I agree with you. He has all the potential in the world, if he stays healthy, to be a top 12 to 16 back if he stays healthy. And that's not where he's going. He's going way later than that. And I actually also kind of like Rashaad Penny in the 15th, 16th round because like that behind Chris Carson, like the second running back in that offense had it varied between Dallas and Hyde and all those guys, but had over 180 touches last year. I mean, you're looking at an offense that runs a ton to the dismay of a lot of Russell Wilson fans. But Penny at that late, if he can stay healthy as well, provides some decent value. And if Carson goes down, Penny can jump right in and get a decent amount of touches. I actually like both of those running backs at their values currently.
Yeah, I think Carson actually gets a little underappreciated just a tad.
He does, yeah. And people think he's boring.
Well, you know what? But here's the thing, Fish, and it's like you're boring, but are you productive? Mm-hmm. And you look at the guys around him, it's still a little bit of youth, still a little unknown, still more projectability than productivity. And I feel like that's kind of where Carson lies in, where it's like, well, I kind of know what I'm getting out of him. Maybe I don't get the upside, but maybe the floor is better. I saw you shaking your head here, Yates, about Penny. Do you see him as this late pick, too, that has a little potential?
Absolutely. I like both these guys this year because not only when Penny was healthy 2 years ago, we saw not only him involved in this offense, but we actually started to see him take over. So now at this point, do we know what Penny is? Do we know what he is coming off of this injury? We don't know his full health status. But as I sat down and did my initial round of projections, Rashaad Penny spit out as a top 30 running back. And I've got Chris Carson at RB15. So I really like both of these guys. I think that they can both thrive in this offense. Yeah, I think that Rashaad Penny he's not going to be drafted anywhere higher than the 11th, 12th round this year, no matter what happens in training camp. People are just so far off of him, which means that he's a screaming value in drafts this year.
All right, let's talk about the wide receivers here. Yates, I'll start with you on this one. DK Metcalf obviously was glorious last year. Lockett basically had all of his productivity in 3 games, where DK Metcalf didn't do much because he got locked down a little bit with some double coverages. And then you got Everett in here, and Dwayne Eskridge, obviously somebody that I know you're high on. I don't know how quick he is going to make an impact fantasy-wise, but let's talk about these wide receivers. Is there another gear in Metcalf? Is Lockett more than just a best ball wide receiver at this point for you? How do you see this wide receiving core for the Seattle Seahawks?
Yeah, I've got Metcalf as at wide receiver 6 right now. And so I think that he is going to take just another step this year. I think that there are very few corners in the NFL who can shut him down. And I think that we're going to see big things from him again this year. Tyler Lockett, man, I just don't want any part of him. I think that he is, like you classified, a best ball, darling, because you're going to get those. I was looking back through his stats the other day, and I completely forgot about his 21 target game that 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, 200 yards and 3 touchdowns.
Was it 3 games that accounted for 66% of his total productivity for the year?
Ridiculous.
That was crazy.
And then with Dwayne Eskridge, I do think that I like Eskridge. I like the signing because it allows them to get answers on those 3rd and 5s, those 3rd and 6. Just get the ball in his hands and allow him to be able to create there and in the horizontal aspect of the game, because both Metcalf and Lockett are vertical threats. And then Everett, you're seeing him come over from Los Angeles. Shane Waldron is the offensive coordinator now here in Seattle, coming over from the Rams, and he has familiarity with Everett. Everett knows this scheme. He knows what he can do in this scheme, and I think that we're going to see him at least be involved. I don't think that it's going to lead to anything of note. I think he'll have some streaming games as a streaming tight end that you can roll him out this year. But other than that, man, I'm excited for this offense. I don't think that it is going to be as run heavy as some people are projecting. The Seahawks lived out of 11 personnel. I think they were the 11th most out of 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver sets last year. And David Moore was their wide receiver 3. So if now you can upgrade on that with Dwayne Eskridge, I think this offense can stay on the field even more than it did last year.
Scott, it was kind of a tale of 2 seasons for Russell Wilson. He was MVP narrative for the first 8 weeks when that defense was historically bad. Then Jamal Adams came back. All of a sudden, that defense got surprisingly better. And then all of a sudden, all of the stats for Russell Wilson started to creep backwards. So to me, I still have Russell Wilson right in that that middle of QB1. He's not in that elite grouping there with Allen and Mahomes and Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson. He's a notch below those guys. But if I had to put on the board for you for a second in a Superflex, Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers, let's say, because I think that's kind of the argument, which way would you go?
I'd probably still go, oh man, that is really tough.
That's why I get the big bucks. I ask questions
we don't know
like
Aaron
this.
Rodgers' landing spot, but there's not a bad one. If he goes to Denver,
well,
that's still a good landing spot, right?
So, let's say it's status quo. He goes back, everybody kisses and makes up. Which way would you go?
Yeah, I think I think I'm just going to lean Aaron Rodgers because I love pissed off Aaron Rodgers.
Is there another kind?
Puts up numbers.
I didn't know there was another kind besides Yates. Who's angrier, Aaron Rodgers or Mike Tagliere?
Tags.
Yeah, okay, tags. But by a hair though, right? Not by a lot. Okay, all right. So you would still go with Aaron Rodgers.
Those are really, really, really close though. Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next team here. Let's talk a little bit about the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray, Scott, was on a again historic pace, right, to be the first guy ever to throw for 4,000 yards and rush for 1,000 yards. Then he got fallen upon, let's put it that way, and all of a sudden that shoulder took a little bit of a hit. There was a couple down games and eventually rebounded, but overall it was a lot of good. The bad was some of the play calling of Cliff Kingsbury at times. I think we could all agree on that. But Kyler Murray, another one of these quarterbacks in that elite tier, that top 5-6 group, obviously, we can debate that, but just start there for me. Your take on Kyler Murray this season. Can he get back onto that pace? And now with that extra game, is that 4,000, 1,000? That 4,000, 1,000?
Yeah, I think it's very achievable. Even the year before that, he was setting records with the combo passing, rushing, or he was on the pace for records. He's in that QB3 to QB5 range from, I think, a lot of people, definitely for me. Cliff Kingsbury, you can say what you want about his play calling, but he throws out the volume. Like the pace of play is ridiculous. There's going to be a lot of plays. And you saw after that injury, it wasn't just his passing. He stopped running as much too. He didn't want to take hits on that shoulder. So with a healthy shoulder, I think you see it get back to where it was.
Now, last year, going into drafts, for some reason, people started fading DeAndre Hopkins, which I took every single advantage I possibly could in every draft. I had so much Hopkins last year, and I loved it. Yates, this receiving core, still Hopkins there. A.J. Green comes in. Christian Kirk still there. They drafted Rondell Moore. So how do you approach this wide receiving core? We know DeAndre is a 1. But do you want anybody else on your fantasy roster? For me, this is kind of a big stay away, but I'm curious. Maybe you see a diamond in this rough.
Man, it's so difficult because Scott just mentioned the pace of play. There's so many pass attempts to go around, and then you look at the offensive structure, the personnel packages, and you say these wide receivers, all of them, are going to get onto the field regularly. But I don't know if that's going to lead to consistent fantasy production. I think that you're going to see some games where A.J. Green pops off, where Christian Kirk pops off, and then Rondale Moore has a couple of big plays here or there. I just don't know if it's going to lead to consistent fantasy production outside of DeAndre Hopkins. You would love to see some more creativity with how they line up DeAndre Hopkins and get him the ball. But I've got him at wide receiver 4, guys. Like, this is just a locked and loaded, DeAndre Hopkins again this season.
Hey, Scott, when you think about Christian Kirk last year, there was that run for like a month where he had a touchdown right in 4 straight games, if memory serves, and he had a really good run there, and that was right before the Kyler Murray injury. So is this a matter of him just being unable to get that deep ball out where Christian Kirk was succeeding a little bit in terms of all the attention going to Hopkins? Or do you think that was just a one-off, you leave it alone and you don't chase it? How do you look at the secondary guys in this receiving game for the Cards?
Yeah, I think that, and what you're remembering is the right exact spot, right around the time Kyler got hurt, and Kirk had like 6 touchdowns in 5 games. Like, a really good stretch there. My concern is the addition to A.J. Green, who got over 100 targets in Cincy. They brought him in. They're going to put him out there and give him 50, 60, 70 targets just to jam that up. And they drafted Rondale Moore. I know they play 4 wide receiver sets basically more than anyone. They have 2 guys in the slot at all times. But my concern is more about, as Kyle mentioned, the spreading out after Hopkins. Like that's my concern with trying to take Kirk even in the 10th round or so.
I went to that well last year with A.J. Green in some leagues and thought maybe I could get some opportunity. I saw the targets early and I thought, it's just a matter of time. That just never came to fruition, and the rest was history, as we know, with the Bengals and Joe Burrow. Now, when we go to the running back position here, Chase Edmonds, James Conner, and I know that the staff came out last year and said, Chase Edmonds we see as a starting running back, but I actually wrote this up on FantasyPros yesterday. Don't take the term starting running back too seriously. A lot of guys are starters. It doesn't make them necessarily bell cows. Don't confuse the two. And I guess I'm trying to drive this home for people. This is a difficult situation. James Conner is very capable, very talented, The problem is he's also had durability questions in his career. Chase Edmonds can catch the football. Chase Edmonds can do a lot of things. But Kyler Murray is there also running the football quite a bit on his own. Yates, how do you approach this backfield, or do you just do the opposite and run away from it altogether?
I think that, people who were holding out hope for Chase Edmonds to be that bell cow back, I was warning people. I was saying, don't do that. Like, it's never going to happen. Chase Edmonds is not the guy that you give more than 15 touches per game, if that, right? 15 touches per game to. And James Conner, I think he can fill this role that they're going to ask him to do, but I don't know if that's going to lead to consistent fantasy production. I've got him outside my top 30 running backs this year. So I think that he'll have some games where you can plug him in as a flex option. He'll maybe score a touchdown. But again, when Kyler Murray is healthy, he's that option around the goal line, much like Josh Allen is in Buffalo, which is why we love Kyler Murray for fantasy. So Chase Edmonds, a valuable flex play, I think, week in and week out because of his receiving ability and what he brings to the table there. James Conner is going to be a depth piece that I want on my roster that I can plug in some matchups if my starters on my fantasy roster get hurt. Outside of that, man, I'm trying to stay away.
I think there might be a narrative out there, well, if there's an injury, there might be clarity. But I'm kind of worried about that because I feel like that's a false sense of security, Scott, right? Because you look at exactly what Yates just mentioned, which is, well, Kyler Murray still has so much of the scoring is filtered through Kyler Murray. And the guys who control their own fantasy points are always the guys I want on my team. Edmonds or Conner would still not be able to do that even if they were solo. So do you think that there's a little bit of a false security blanket, if you will, with that notion of, well, if I have them both and then one emerges or whatever it is, then that'll be really good for me? It still maxes out as a flex spot, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's the type of strategy you take if you did not grab any running backs earlier and you're left trying to figure out how to work these two guys into flexes and hope one gets injured so you do have clarity. I will say this is a team that had 25 rushing touchdowns last year. I mean, 10 of them were Kyler Murray, but Edmonds never had more than 11 or 12 carries in a game. It's going to be very split, probably. And the price they're both like top 10 round guys. I'm avoiding them at the current moment. But you're right. If an injury happens, great. But I would not count on that. I never try to predict injuries.
Well, and also, I just don't know how much it really moves the needle. A few more touches a game, it doesn't all of a sudden make them an RB2 high end or something like that. Just doesn't happen. I think. Well, that's the thing. People want to say, well, what if? Well, this is why I go back to Chris Carson. Yeah, that's your RB2. That's where you want to live, with that safe guy that you feel pretty good about and you know who he is. And you can identify him. All right, let's talk about your best defense against the unexpected. Are you prepared for the unthinkable if it happens? If a medical emergency arises, Air Medcare Network provides members with world-class emergency air transport services to the nearest hospital with no out-of-pocket expenses. Join today and never pay a dime for your medical flight when flown by AMCN providers. Insurance doesn't always cover the full cost of a medical emergency, so this is a great way to secure your financial peace of mind. Membership costs as low as $85 a year for your entire household, and right now, as Fantasy Pros listener, you'll get up to $50 Visa or Amazon gift card with a new membership. All you have to do is visit airmedcarenetwork.com/fantasypros. Use the offer code FantasyPros, that's one word, and no matter where you are in the game of life, Air Medcare Network memberships are the protection that you need and that you can't live without. Let's talk about another team that maybe can't live without their new quarterback, and it's Matthew Stafford. Oh, Sean McVay's got to be so happy about this. He's just got to be loving life right now. It looks like he got his guy, his veteran QB. Matthew Stafford is probably the only guy happier than Sean McVay because he's finally out of Detroit. Kyle Yates, what does this mean to the Rams offense in 2021 to make this move from Goff to Stafford? How much of an upgrade is it?
Oh, my word, it means everything. I mean, the difference between Jared Goff and who he is and Matthew Stafford, one of the most underappreciated quarterbacks in the entire NFL. I think that we're going to see this offense just skyrocket this year. And I think that Matthew Stafford, I've got him at QB 11 right now, guys. And I think that, I could see moving him up as the offseason goes along, because you look back at what Jared Goff did last year, like his touchdown totals were terrible, and it's not like I had a good impression of Jared Goff, right? But yet the numbers that he put up in this offense were just terrible. Now, if you see those numbers go up to Matthew Stafford's historical averages, right? If Matthew Stafford throws for 30, 29, 31 touchdowns. Like, suddenly we're talking about a massive increase here for guys like Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. I mean, Tyler Higbee is someone who I really, really like out of this offense. So Matthew Stafford, what he is going to be able to do with Sean McVay, the pairing of the two, it's a fantasy football dream come true.
All right, Fish, let's get to the running back situation here. Cam Akers certainly looked like he was emerging, had a great Thursday night football game against the Pats. He continued to build on that. Darrell Henderson's still there, but I feel like Cam Akers is really kind of set up to be the guy now, and Matthew Stafford's ability to read the field and just play the position more efficiently is a really great thing for Cam Akers' value, because it really has to keep opposing defenses on their heels a little bit more, and that opens things up for Cam Akers, who I think is a better all-purpose running back than people might realize. What are your thoughts on Akers and Henderson, if he's something you want to maybe hedge your bets with a little bit on your rosters?
Yeah, I don't even know that I'd be hedging. I think it's all in on Cam Akers this year. The last 3 games of the year, Darrell Henderson's snaps in those games where Cam Akers just took over the load at the end of the year were like 18, 7, and 7. We're talking not even 30 total or 32 total snaps over 3 games. That's not touches, that's snaps. So it was just all Cam Akers. I'm sure he's going to get in there more. They're not going to have Cam Akers play 99% of the snaps all year long. But and Darrell Henderson's, price tag in the 13th, 14th, 15th round, it's not terrible, but if I'm a betting man, I want Cam Akers in those first 2 rounds and maybe even the first round. I think he's that kind of back that he's just going to be an elite top back this year.
Well, let's talk about that receiving core now. Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp leading it again. Deshaun Jackson comes in this offseason. I don't know what's left in that tank, but Van Jefferson to me was very impressive towards the end. I've got my eye on him in all the deeper leagues for sure. We'll talk more about him in a second. Tutu Atwell was drafted here, and of course Tyler Higbee, Yates mentioned as being that guy. And this is why you watch on YouTube at FantasyPros, because when you say Tutu Atwell, you get an eye roll from Yates every single time about Tutu. God, did he hate this pick so much, and I love it. He just can't help himself. So, Fish, let's get your thoughts, and then we'll go to Yates on this one. Your draft capital for these guys, where are you laying it down?
I actually like all their values. I think Kupp is going to be awesome with Stafford. I just do. You watch some of their, they already have the chemistry in camp, and I know they're not, they're in shorts and whatnot. You can't get a whole lot from that, but they already have it. I think. I was a guy who liked Jefferson. I don't know that I saw as much as I would have wanted to out of him last year, but it's a position where the third wide receiver is always on the field for them. That's the problem with when Everett and Higbee were splitting, that they didn't get 2 tight ends out there because they always had a third wide receiver out there. So Jefferson's going to get a lot of play out there. I really like him deep in your drafts. Woods, he's okay. 5th, 6th round, 7th. Like, I'm okay with it. They're just generally better options I like at that point, but I like Kupp a lot for Matthew Stafford.
All right, Yates, let's get your take on these guys, and let's include Higbee in this mix in the passing game as well.
Man, I love both these guys. Robert Woods at wide receiver 17 for me right now. Cooper Kupp at wide receiver 18. I think you can
every year, right? They're back
every
to back,
single year.
Like
they're right there, and I think that the case could be made as I go. I mentioned it as I go throughout the offseason. I could give each of these guys an extra touchdown or 2, and that because of liking Matthew Stafford, and as I assess the situation more, then that would move them both up into top 15 territory. So I think both of these guys are incredible values in your draft. I want Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp everywhere that I can get them. I'm going to disagree with you guys on Van Jefferson, though, because I do think that with Josh Reynolds, he was that field stretching option for this offense, and I think that's why they brought in Deshaun Jackson. Now, how many games is Deshaun Jackson going to play? That's the question. But Van Jefferson, he does not fill that role. Jefferson fills more of that possession underneath. The pick in the 2nd round last year was puzzling to me. For even as much as I liked Jefferson, I did not like the fit, because it's like, okay, how does he get onto the field? I think he's going to need an injury to one of these other guys to really truly break out. I think he'll get snaps. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I think that he'll get snaps, and I think that he'll show up on the stat sheet, but I just don't know if it's going to be enough to push him into true fantasy relevance. As for Tyler Higbee, I've got him at tight end 11 right now. When I did my initial stats, he came out at tight end 5. So I had to bring him down because I was like, that's a little bit too much. I cannot do that. So I brought him down just a little bit, but the path is absolutely there for Tyler Higbee to be a very, very fantasy relevant tight end option this year.
Well, this is a perfect transition here from what you just said, because we're going to talk about the sleepers, the busts, and the breakouts from the NFC West. And I'm going to start with my sleeper, which is Van Jefferson. And that's why, because Cooper Kupp, I'm a little worried about that health. And I think the guy that could step up into that role and be fantastic and be one of the guys that people run into the waiver wire for is Van Jefferson, but he's already on your roster. I'm telling you right now, I think it's worth noting and worth drafting to see if Cooper Kupp even makes it out of preseason healthy and okay, because he's had some problems these last couple years being on the field. So for that reason, exactly what Yates is saying, Jefferson to me has not only the talent, but possibly a path, because Jackson's health, meh. Cooper Kupp's health also kind of questionable at times in the last few years. Fish, let's get to your sleeper for the NFC West. We'll start with yours next.
Yeah, I was torn between two guys, and I'm just gonna make the decision right here on air that I'm gonna stick with Rashaad Penny from earlier. I just think that Seattle backup for where he's going in drafts, it's just so ridiculously low, like 16th, 17th round for a running back that could be like a flex play on a lot of weeks, or just take over the role if Carson gets hurt. It's too cheap for him not to be a decent sleeper.
And Yates, you're cheating. You have two sleepers here, I see.
I was going to just mention one of them if someone else took him, so I will go with Darrell Henderson, because you guys talked about him briefly with Cam Akers in that discussion. I like Darrell Henderson a lot this year. You know, Scott, you mentioned they're not going to give Cam Akers 99% of the snaps and stuff like that, you know, especially now. We have to factor in a 17-game season, right? Cam Akers cannot hold up to that. He was getting 30 carries per game. Sorry, that's not happening for a 17-game season. So I do think you're going to see Darrell Henderson involved, and especially, too, once you look at the other depth chart options. Xavier Jones, Raymond Calais, Jake Funk. Like, there's no one else here. There's no Malcolm Brown who's going to step in as a veteran presence now and take away opportunities. So then with Darrell Henderson, I think that he is going to have some flex appeal week in and week out. But then also, what happens if Cam Akers goes down with an injury? Unspeakable upside. So I will go with Darrell Henderson here as a sleeper option.
The thing that I think people should be aware of with that extra game this year is backs like Penny and Henderson might get more work throughout the season just to keep the workloads down on their stars, which is a very possible thing.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's talk about the busts here. Raheem Mostert for me. The age, the fact that he's bounced around so much, chasing that one season where everything just broke right for a stretch of games. I'm just not going to do it, so I'm out. That's my bust. Yates, who's your bust in the NFC West?
We talked about him earlier. It's Tyler Lockett. And while you can look at, I've got Tyler Lockett at wide receiver 29 on the season. While I think that that's where he could end up, the week-to-week consistency, man, I don't want any single part of him. So it's been this for how many years now, where if you have him in those games that he pops off, then you automatically won your matchup. Like, no one's competing with that type of performance. But the other weeks, man, it's gross. So the week-to-week consistency, I can't get on board. I will call Tyler Lockett a bust this year.
All right, who's your bust, Fish?
I'm over here laughing because my busts were Mostert with my backup as Lockett. So
oh, look at that. Look at that. Great minds, my friend.
I agree with both of you on that. If I'm going to have to pivot, since you guys both brilliantly picked those two players, I'm just going to go with the Arizona backfield. I just don't really want it.
That was my second one.
I just don't really want it at the cost, both going in the top 10 rounds. You know, you might find, we mentioned if there's an injury, you might find value from one of them. Otherwise, I just don't really want them.
All right, let's do the breakouts here. And look, it's Cam Akers for me. I think he does break out. I'm kind of just going to piggyback what Scott was talking about, where I think he's going to take that game to the next level. I think he's going to finish as an RB1. I think that role is set up for him. I love the new quarterback addition. I think that enters into it so much for me with my takes on Akers and basically looking at the volume that's there potentially. Yes, the extra game. Sure, Henderson's going to get some work too. I don't think that's a bad thing because I want to keep Akers fresh. So that's actually a good thing. Even if you see it for the first month, don't panic. I think it will win out as time goes on. Yates, let's do your breakout guy.
Yeah, it's Trey Lance. I mean, you know,
Shocker.
The quarterback position here. Let's go with it because of what he can do with his rushing mobility and everything, and what that translates to for fantasy purposes. Uniting with Kyle Shanahan here, the sky is the limit for Trey Lance. And we talked about it earlier. The bye week is probably where we should right now be expecting him to step in. What happens if he goes week 1 and you're getting him as the QB 28 off the board or something like that in your fantasy drafts? You know, it's just an absolute breakout candidate.
Fish, wrap it up with your breakout for the NFC West.
Yeah, so I had both those two. I love this show right now. But I am going to piggyback right off of Yates and say, both Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk. I know you didn't seem to love Deebo as much as maybe I do. I really like Deebo this year because I think he fits well with Trey Lance. But Aiyuk showed himself to be a true alpha receiver when Deebo was out, when both Deebo and Kittle were out. I think that Deebo also, in the games he played with Aiyuk, he had just as many targets in like 3 of those 5 or whatever. And the game without Kittle or Aiyuk, he had like 11 for 135 or something. Like, he had a huge game. I think both of these guys going like, 60th overall and 85th overall, I think that they can both smash those spots, and we can see Aiyuk enter that range of a top 15 wide receiver, and we can see Deebo Samuel move into a wide receiver 2 range. So I'm going to go with both of those guys.
He's the one, the only Scott Fish. You can follow him on Twitter at ScottFish24. SFB 11 begins in just a few weeks. Are you prepared for this, Scott Fish?
No, I'm not.
No, good answer.
Nope, not at all.
Anything else you want to plug, my friend? And again, we can't thank you enough for all the work that you do, beyond the industry. And I know I am very appreciative of it, and so is Yates, so is everybody. And once again, I encourage people to take a page out of Scott's book here and find ways to do good things with this fun, beautiful thing that we have called fantasy football. So what do you got going on, Fish?
Sure. Just follow me, ScottFish24 on Twitter. My day job is SafeLeaguesFantasy.com. I run a legal commissioner service that, we run fantasy leagues, dynasty leagues, redraft leagues, fun, unique formats as well. ScottFishBowl.com is where you can sign up to try to play in the Scott Fish Bowl with all 3 of us.
There you go. Hang out with us and play a little fantasy football with your boys. Also, FantasyPros.com/chat for that Discord. Also, want to remind everybody, get that Lawnmower 4.0. The code is Yates for a reason. I'll let your mind run wild with that. Manscaped.com, 20% off and free shipping with the code Yates. And don't forget also about Air Medcare. Use the code FantasyPros there as well. I want to thank all of the sponsors. I want to thank Scott Fish for taking the time. And I want to encourage everybody who's even not playing in the Scott Fish Bowl to go make a donation to Fantasy Cares. Go check it out. Go to Scott's Twitter handle and find him there at ScottFish24 and find ways to get involved. Even if you're not playing, do some good out there, or go donate to St. Jude's with the Black Book. Do something that's bigger than yourself. I want to encourage you all to do that on this weekend. So that'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Scott Fish and Kyle Yates, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.
Thanks for tuning in to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Don't forget to check out our featured videos. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Fantasy Pros, so you can get the latest news and updates to give you the edge you need in your fantasy league.